The other morning I was driving my daughter to school and I turned the radio on and she quickly turned it off, like in a really sort of inconsiderate way. And I looked at her and she said, "I'm sorry, I'm really overstimulated right now. I just needed to be quiet for a minute." And immediately when she voiced that to me, I knew what she meant, and it immediately took away, at least within a few seconds, my irritation. And of course we can talk about other ways to express herself when she's not that way. But the language to be able to say, "I am at my limit right now, and it's not about you," and that's what the beautiful moment was. It was a shortcut. And it made me think about how often so many of us are literally overstimulated. In the world we live in, exposed to news and social media and all the expectations and pressures on our lives, not to mention each of our unique brains and our sensitivities. And regardless of whether it's from hypervigilance, from something like childhood trauma, to a neurodivergent brain, or both, the truth is that so many of us are being overstimulated and triggered, and we don't even know it. And so I thought I'd talk today about what that is. Of course, kids raised by a therapist mother are going to have this language more than those who aren't, probably, but it's powerful. And I want you to know what's happening and give you some things to do to help yourself prevent it and also to manage it when it's happening. So first of all, what does it mean to be overstimulated? It basically means that we are having an excessive amount of input, so much input into our senses that we can't manage it for whatever reason. And it looks like extreme emotional or physical discomfort or both. So it's anger, anxiety, emotional responses like sadness, tearfulness. It can be something like not being able to focus. It can be like a quick rage. Whatever it is, it's basically like you just you literally have a cup and you just literally overpoured it. I know I say literally so much. I will work on it and I'm going to try to slow down today. And so who does this happen to? Like I said, it can be for all kinds of reasons, from stress to your sensory issues, to things like ADHD, to being on the spectrum for autism, to living in hypervigilance or all of the above, having anxiety, depression. All kinds of things can create this swirl of overwhelm. And so reasons that cause it, what makes this happen to us? Now, I like to think of this as a threshold. We all have, or they call a window of tolerance for managing our lives in whatever stress is happening or situations, and the way our body and our brain deals with all of these things. And so my threshold might not look like yours. In fact, if we're talking about senses and being sensitive to sensory issues, I definitely have things like smell is a huge one for me. It makes me rageful in certain situations, which is just terrible. But I can smell things that I wish I couldn't 10 miles away. If a neighbor is, doing that, I'm like, okay, even though in California it feels like every house smells like that when you go for a walk outside. I open the door to let the dogs out and I smell it. Or when my kids were little, I would be like, okay, who needs a diaper change? It was just relentless. And of course that wasn't going to make me mad. But if they were my kids, it might be like, oh great, this is no fun to deal with, right? But that's part of parenting. But when it happens in our adult lives as parents though, maybe the dog's barking, the baby is crying, your child needs help in the kitchen or hurt themselves, your spouse is yelling at you, the phone's ringing, you've been on social media for the last 2 hours, now you have to get in the car and go to carpool and pick up. Just in terms of parenting, for example, or you're at work and your coworker chews loud and makes noises when they eat their food every day, and they're insensitive and they talk about things too loudly, and your boss is down the hallway, and it's just too much. So all of that can happen to any of us for, I'm saying, any reason. But certain things that we know can trigger it. Number one, social media. Being on social media too long definitely makes most people some degree of anxious in some dynamic. So maybe you won't be overstimulated if you're just on your phone. But now let's say that same morning you didn't sleep well the night before, you haven't eaten yet, right? All of a sudden you have a demand from someone that feels overwhelming and you're on your phone or your computer. So social media can be very triggering. I think that all of that repeated scrolling for the brain and input it's really important to set limits around that. Number 2, time urgency, having to get out the door, trying to get somewhere. So all of this kind of boils up when you're in a hurry. Being overexposed to news and just negativity in general can be impactful. Certainly having stress-related experiences. So you're going to the doctor, you are at the hospital, your best friend is having a hard day, you're in a grocery store and someone's screaming at the clerk, you've had a fight with your spouse and your kids are now driving you crazy. Whatever it is, there can be this like swirling stress-related social dynamic. Things like coffee and stimulants can definitely be impactful. Noises, loud noises, smells, certainly lighting. We all know that, I mean, my daughter, same thing. We all have these issues, so many of us, but even she was saying literally the lights in school give me a headache. The bright overhead lights. It's why so many therapists, if you notice, we have dimming lights and lamps. I don't think I've ever used the overhead light in any office I ever worked at before I was working from home. Certainly things like social events, like anxiety, social anxiety, large crowds, going even to Disneyland, somewhere where it's supposed to be the happiest place on earth, which if you're a parent, you know it is very often not the happiest place on earth in the moment sometimes. Being tired, being stressed, not getting enough sleep, like I said before, just any kind of like excessive or just out of your comfort zone even, sensory exposure, living with chronic stress, right? So all of those things can just quickly happen. And the problem is not only are you overstimulated, but like in that moment, I was ready to like be mad at her for doing that. It was just this quick like turning on, you know, it just seemed rude. It was like, what are you doing? And it didn't seem respectful. And for me, if I'm not mindful, I could go back into childhood where I don't matter, and I could go into an emotional flashback. And then, you know, as a parent, these things happen all the time, and we're gonna lose it sometimes. We just are. But ideally, the more that we're trying to slow down and be aware, the less likely we're going to do and say things that later we don't feel good about. And that's the difference, is if you understand that your baby, your toddler, your 8-year-old, your 17-year-old is overstimulated, as opposed to they're being bratty or immature or mean or unkind or selfish, which a lot of emotionally lacking parents or immature parents, and all of us, even if we're not immature, like we have these moments where we get triggered too. But I really think if you can reframe and understand that so much of what's happening for those around us and ourselves is this like overstimulation moment, it really can make a difference in how you respond. Like I said, it was a shortcut. She said that, I got it, I know what it feels like. I was able to kind of settle my little mom ego and be like, oh, it was annoying, she's been stressful all morning, but I get it. And so I just drove her to school and we were just quiet the whole way there. And she, you know, said, look, I have a whole day ahead of me where school is really stressful. And I know that she has sensory issues. And so it was fine. I was over it, didn't think another thing about it. But when I thought about making videos, I was like, oh, this is a good topic, I think. So obviously if you have things like neurodivergency, you're going to even be more likely. See, my attention deficit brain likes to talk 90 miles an hour. So now the next thing is, what can you do about it when it's happening? So I'm going to give you a quick rundown of things you can do, and I want to give you another little quick rundown for parents, because I think it happens a lot more. The more things you add to your environment that you can't control, the more exposed you become to other people's sounds and noises and triggers and things like that. So let's start with just what to do. So it's happening to you, you want to try to pause. I say this all the time, but pausing and not reacting before I say something I'm going to regret, so I can check in with myself. Of course, oftentimes if we've gone, our brains flip the lid too far, we're too far gone to pause. So maybe you flip out and you yell and then you pause, but the goal is to try to pause. The next thing is to go put yourself in another room, to step out of the car if it's safe. Give me just a minute, I'll be right back. To do some breathing. Think about like the 4-7-8 breathing, where you breathe in for 4, you hold for 7, you exhale for 8. But honestly, if you just inhale and you exhale twice as long, that's a great place to start, right? So we want to be careful if we're driving or doing some dangerous activity that we don't pass out with deep breathing. But something like just an inhale to the count of 4 and an exhale to the count of 8, or 2 and 4. Basically, that longer exhale is what's really going to trigger that nervous system response to slow down. We can use grounding techniques. Another option is to listen to music. We know that music can be incredibly helpful, whether it's listening to a sound bath or your favorite music, depending upon what's happening, putting yourself in front of or around white noise or pink noise or even brown noise. And what are those, you ask? Let me tell you. So white noise is like, that shh kind of staticky sound we often have. I have one in my room for when I sleep at night. Pink noise is a deeper sound where it sounds more like pounding, rain, heartbeats, or wind tunnels. Brown noise is deeper still. It's a drumming waterfall or rumbling thunder. And green noise has both the high and low frequency sounds filtered out. And this is coming from Dr. Christine Gibson's new book I'm going to share more about soon, called The Modern Trauma Toolkit. So basically, it's like trying to find ways to get a barrier to help your body and nervous system calm down from the responses. So earplugs can be helpful if it's at night. When my kids as teenagers, they go to bed after I do, and I am so sound sensitive that I have my noisemaker on, I have my door shut, I have to have earplugs in if they're going to be like messing around, because I will wake up and then I can't go back to sleep. But you can also create music playlists. I'm going to talk more about this in another video in the next couple days about how to deal with dysregulation. You want to find a way to kind of like get your body into a more soothing state through some form of music. It can be meditative music, it can be Fleetwood Mac or Taylor Swift or whatever you love. Take a shower, right? Just removing yourself. If you're overstimulated, to just go and put your body in the way of the warm water, or even a cold shower if you like the cold experience. Along those lines, using ice on your wrists and hands, on your face, splashing your face with cold water. Changing your clothes. I know that for many of us, one of our triggers is the feeling of our clothes. And so for me, it's always been when I used to work outside of the house, the minute I come in the door, I put my pajama pants on, I put a t-shirt or sweatshirt on, or my jammies. It's just a huge thing for me to be completely comfortable. I don't feel like I'm fully myself if I'm still in those kind of clothing situations. And this is true for your kids too, right? Oftentimes we want them to look a certain way, but they're not comfortable that way. And so maybe you have to dress up in some event with them, but the minute you get home, you help them get comfy and cozy. Looking at things like sleep and stress management, I'm a massive believer. I was like, should I make a video about this? But I think I will, about how to work on your sleep, because I fully believe that, and it's not just me, the research shows that sleep is so related to our mental health. And it is one of the things I ask my patients about a lot. How are you sleeping? What's going on with your sleep? If they've had sleep issues, are you working on that? What's the kind of situation with that? Because that's going to make that window of tolerance we all have even shorter. If I haven't slept all night, right, and my daughter's having a hard morning, or the dogs are barking while she's doing that, and the smoke detector goes off, which goes off all the time in my little house when I'm making anything, it is so freaking triggering. And in those moments, I feel out of control, but also I don't want to do or say anything that doesn't feel good, ideally. Obviously, using things like self-compassion tools. I love selfcompassion.org. Once you do feel that way, to talk to yourself and give yourself that reparenting love, like it's okay, and what do you need right now? And it's understandable that you feel triggered and overwhelmed. You can obviously do things like, tapping on yourself. You can use havening techniques. I have a video here, but I would suggest you go check out, seek out the havening website itself and research those techniques. You can do, rocking back and forth, hugging yourself, things like that. And really getting off devices is really important. So if you know that you're overstimulated, it's probably not a good idea to just grab your phone and go back onto that. Now, if that helps you focus and calm, great. But I would say that being mindful of your device use. Exercise. There are times when I feel so anxious that I just open the door, I put my flip-flops on, and I just walk out, because I do live near the beach, which is great, although walking on the beach sometimes hurts my knees because I'm so old now. But I just start walking down there, and I know that I'm not going to get a good exercise walk in, but I just have to be outside, especially if you work from home or you're in the house with little people or big people all day. Getting yourself out of that environment, it's mind-blowing. And we know, of course, things like blue and green environments can really help trigger that nervous system calmness and soothing nature. So all of those things can be helpful. Now, really quickly, if you are a mom or dad or parent, you want to look at things like what kind of mental load are you carrying, and giving yourself grace, asking for help. For so many parents, they are carrying the entire mental load of the home. So they're thinking about things like the dentist appointments that need to be made, the homework not done, the groceries, tonight's dinner, the bills that aren't paid, the taxes that are due, the leak in the bathroom, the car needing to be serviced. All of those things. If we're carrying all of that, it just makes it even more likely to blow and to feel overstimulated. Things like looking at your multitasking, slowing down, trying to set more realistic goals for yourself about how you set up your day, reducing the commitments that you make, so really being mindful of your schedule where you can, trying to focus on your eat, sleep, and exercise. Even being hungry can be very triggering. I know that a lot of parents, this wasn't discussed when I was raising my kids when they were younger, about being touched out with your kids just on you and maybe your spouse. Like, you just don't ever feel like you have space for yourself. So trying to create boundaries and self-care. Looking at how you're over-judging yourself so that you can reduce your commitments to things. Creating downtime for yourself, where even if it's 10 minutes in the car before pickup. I have a lot of moms I work with who I've gotten to do meditation apps in the pickup line. So when the door opens to the car, they're ideally, sometimes, not always, but more calm. Or even doing those with your kids. Looking at getting in comfy clothes more often. Are you giving yourself some standard that you're supposed to be dressing like during the day, but maybe that's not comfortable every day? Looking at how you define your life. This is really important. I think if you have these issues as a parent, I always try to come back to, like, what do I want my kids to remember about the tone of my home and of me? And some days it was not great. But if you kind of set in your mind, like, this is what I've called the mission statement, like the Jerry Maguire movie. I've asked clients, I discuss this a lot. What is your mission statement for your family? What are the priorities? Because if the priorities are to be more calm, more loving, and more connected, but you have your kids in 5 sports and you have 3 different children, not probably going to happen. It's just the reality, and that's fine. But there have to be some trade-offs. So all of those things, giving yourself permission to not be perfect, which can be a huge reason why we put ourselves in these situations. Oh, I have to do this today and that today, and the kids need this and that. And the next thing I know, my window of tolerance before I blow is like this wide. It was definitely a lot smaller when I had all 4 kids in the house and a lot more going on. And then the last thing I will say is what could contribute to being overstimulated outside of course, the way our brains and bodies work, which is in conjunction with these, can be things like having childhood CPTSD, having a strong inner critic, not having enough help, or your partner or spouse not responding to requests for help, or you being a single parent in some fashion, having anxiety, having mental health issues or physical health issues, chronic illness, insomnia, sleep issues, being unrealistic about the expectations on yourself, having kids with special needs. If you have a child that does not fit in a little perfect box, and your child has some type of disability or mental health issue or both, which can be both, obviously, something like ADHD, for example. A lot of parents that have kids with ADHD, I've seen often the parents have it too, and we don't know that. And there's a lot that happens with kids who have impulsivity, who can't, manage their emotions or feelings. Like, all of that makes everything I just said even more important to look at. It just makes it harder. It's already hard. A child with chronic illness. My daughter had a lot of hospitalizations, long-term hospitalizations. And it added to the overall stress of my hypervigilance and my fears and things like that. And so you just really want to look at, giving yourself grace and looking at your history, how all of that, alongside the insane amount of things we're all supposed to do every day, from our diet to our exercise to our friendships to our health to our mental health to our jobs. It's like our parenting. It's insane. To our pets. It's too much. And so I think most of us have a pretty small window of tolerance most days. And it takes intentional effort to not only manage not having that happen, but knowing what to do in those moments. So I think it's really helpful to teach your kids and yourself how to use that shortcut language, like I said in the beginning. One little sentence: I'm overstimulated. I got it. And she was self-advocating. I was able to be empathic. I wasn't triggered, because I could have gone off on her about how rude she was being. And it wasn't ideal, but I understood it. And so that's what I'm hoping that this gives you, is understanding and compassion for yourself and also some things to think about in terms of how to manage your life. Okay. I know this was a longer video. I'm trying to make some shorter ones too, but I feel like this was a big topic and I really wanted to cover not just what it is, but as so many of you ask for so often, which is like, okay, outside of therapy, what can I do? And so that's what I'm trying to do. So anyway, thank you so much for being here. I've been so blessed to watch this channel start growing more and more of you to join. It's amazing. And please be gracious when you look at my older videos of me talking even faster than now. I appreciate you so much being here, and I do read so many of your comments. I am truly a one woman show. I run a full practice. I have 4 children, not all in my home still, but and I don't have any other real help in any other ways. And so just responding to emails, if they're not my patients, is really challenging, even for my kids and things like that for school. So please know that I read your comments. I read emails as much as I can. I might try to get some help at some point. I'm trying to do this situation here and share content. It's just a lot. So please don't take it as I don't care, because I really, really do. I get overwhelmed pretty quickly, and I go at a pretty high pace, but I still do. And I want you to know that I do see you and I appreciate you so much. So thanks for being here. Please stay safe and well, like I always say, and I will see you tomorrow. Okay, take care.